If you're thinking about buying or selling a home in Moore County, North Carolina, the July numbers tell an important story. We have considerably more homes for sale than we did a year ago. Buyers have more choices. Homes are taking a little longer to sell, and sellers are seeing more competition. But what does that exactly mean if you're planning a move? Let's go take a look at 6 numbers from July of 2026 and compare them with July of 2025. So let's start with inventory because I think this is one of the most important numbers in our market right now. In July of 2026, Moore County had 822 active listings compared to 696 in July of 2025. That's an increase of about 18% in just 1 year. For buyers, the good news, more inventory means more choices and potentially less pressure to make an immediate decision when you find a home. For sellers, this number is especially important. You're competing against considerably more homes than you were a year ago. That makes pricing, condition, presentation, and marketing even more important. Buyers have alternatives and they're comparing your home with everything else available in your price range. Our next graph is absorption rate. Moore County's absorption rate was 4.63 months in July of 2026 compared to 4.27 in July of 2025. That's about an 8.4% increase. Absorption rate basically tells us how long it would take to sell our current inventory at the present pace of sales if no additional homes came on the market. At 4.63 months, we're seeing a more balanced market than we experienced during the extremely competitive seller's market a few years ago. For buyers, that can mean more time and more opportunity to negotiate. For sellers, it means you can't necessarily use the strategy that worked a few years ago. Putting a home on the market at an aggressive price and waiting for buyers to compete for it may not work in today's environment. So our next graph is average days on market. We're also seeing homes take slightly longer to sell. The average days on market in July of 2026 was 76.8 days compared with 73.5 in July of 2025. That's about a 4.5% increase. Now remember that this is an average across Moore County. Individual neighborhoods, price ranges can perform very differently. For sellers, the important takeaways are that you have to be realistic about timing. If you're selling because you're relocating, buying another home, or working toward a specific closing date, you need to factor that market time into your plans. For buyers, additional market time can increase opportunities, especially when a home has been sitting on the market and the seller may be a little more willing to negotiate. So let's talk about prices. The median active list price in July of 2026 was $469,000, compared with $474,450 in July of 2025. That's only about a 1.1% decrease. But the median sold price was $442,500 compared with $464,500 in July of 2025, a decrease of about 4.7%. That's something both buyers and sellers should pay attention to. For sellers, the price you see on active listings isn't necessarily the price buyers are ultimately paying. For buyers, increased inventory does not mean that every seller is going to dramatically reduce their price, but it does mean you have more opportunities to compare homes, negotiate, and determine the property that represents the best for you. So that brings us directly to our sold to list price ratio. In July of 2026, homes sold for an average of 96.1% of their list price compared to 97% in July of 2025. That difference may sound small, but it supports what we've been seeing throughout these numbers. Buyers have gained some negotiating power. For sellers, this is another reason why your initial pricing strategy matters. Starting too high can lead to additional days on market, price reductions, and ultimately a larger gap between your asking price and your final sales price. For buyers, remember that negotiation isn't always about price. Depending on the property and circumstances, there may also be opportunities involving closing costs, repairs, or some other terms. So finally, let's take a look at the total dollar volume of the market because that gives us an interesting comparison. In July 2026, the total value of the active listings was approximately $529.4 million. In July of 2025, it was approximately 452 million. That's an increase of about 17% in the value of homes currently available for sale. But let's look at the sold volume. In July of 2026, we had approximately $104.7 million in closed sales, compared with approximately $113.8 million in July of 2025. That decrease is about 8%. So we have significantly more real estate available for sale, while the dollar volume actually closing has declined. That really summarizes what we're seeing here in Moore County. There's more competition among sellers and more selection for buyers. So what does this all mean? Is Moore County suddenly a buyer's market? I wouldn't make that blanket statement. Real estate is extremely local. Pinehurst can behave differently from Southern Pines, Whispering Pines, Seven Lakes, or other parts of Moore County. Even within the same community, different price ranges can perform differently. But the July numbers clearly show a market that is giving buyers more choices and more negotiating power than they had when inventory was extremely limited. If you're selling, this isn't a reason to panic. It is a reason to be strategic. Your price needs to reflect today's competition, not what your neighbors sold for 2 or 3 years ago. If you're buying, more inventory gives you options, but the best homes that are priced correctly can still attract plenty of attention. If you're thinking about buying or selling in Moore County, I'd be happy to help you look specifically at any neighborhood, price range, or the type of home you're considering. Those numbers are ultimately much more important than a countywide average. My name's Terry Nani. I'm with Towering Pines Real Estate, brokered by eXp. Have a great day.